Lina was born in a small, impoverished village surrounded by the dense forest of the highlands. Her family lived in a mud hut, barely making ends meet. Her father was a fisherman who could not fish enough to feed the family, and her mother worked tirelessly weaving cloth, but it was never enough. Despite this, Lina maintained a hopeful outlook, finding joy in the small things like the sound of the river and the sight of wildflowers in the fields. One evening, the village elders gathered to announce Lina's impending marriage to a young man named Kofi, whose family was just as poor as hers. She had heard little about Kofi, other than that his family was humble, like hers. Though reluctant, Lina agreed to the arrangement. The elders promised her that marriage would provide security, even if it meant a life of hard work. Kofi was a quiet, reserved young man, with soft brown eyes that seemed to hold a deep sadness. He had never been the talkative type, and Lina soon realized he often kept to himself. His family lived in a small wooden house near the river, no different from her own. At first, she thought his reserved nature might be a reflection of his shyness or lack of confidence. However, something about him made her feel both nervous and curious. The village expected them to marry soon, but Lina couldn't help but feel uneasy. She had hoped for a marriage filled with joy and companionship, not a life of toil with a stranger. As the wedding date drew closer, Lina's heart grew heavier. She tried to console herself by thinking of the stability marriage would bring. But on the day of the wedding, when Lina was in her best dress, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The ceremony was simple, with no extravagant display, yet there was an undeniable sense of community around them. Kofi was kind but distant, and she could sense that he too was struggling to embrace this new life they had begun together. Despite the simplicity of their union, Lina was determined to make it work, hoping that in time they would find happiness together. Their first few days as husband and wife were filled with routine. Kofi worked long hours in the fields, while Lina took care of the home. They barely exchanged words, and Lina couldn't shake the feeling that Kofi was hiding something from her. Her intuition told her that there was more to him than met the eye, but she didn't know what. Despite their silence, Lina began to grow accustomed to Kofi's presence. She found herself looking for small gestures of affection, hoping for a sign that they could become a real couple. But those moments never came. They were two strangers, living in the same house, bound by obligation rather than love. One afternoon, as Lina was cleaning the house, she noticed a locked chest hidden in the corner of their small bedroom. She had never seen Kofi open it, and her curiosity got the better of her. When Kofi was away at the market, she opened it, thinking she might find some forgotten letters or old photographs. Instead, she was stunned to find stacks of money, thick bundles of crisp bills. Her heart raced as she quickly closed the chest, her mind racing with questions. How could this be? The Kofi she knew was poor, just like her. Where had this money come from? When Kofi returned home, Lina didn't wait for him to settle in. She confronted him, her voice shaking with disbelief. Where did you get this money, Kofi? Why have you been hiding it from me? Kofi's expression faltered. For the first time, Lina saw a flicker of something beyond his usual calm exterior, guilt. He hesitated before speaking, and Lina's heart pounded as she waited for his response. I didn't want you to know, he said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of shame and regret. I didn't want you to marry me because of my wealth. I wanted you to love me for who I am. Lina was stunned. Kofi, her quiet, humble husband, was not poor at all. He was a millionaire, a man who had built his fortune through wise investments and hard work over the years. But he had never revealed his wealth to anyone in the village, preferring to live modestly. Kofi explained how he had inherited a vast sum of money from his late uncle, a successful businessman. The wealth had been passed down through generations, but Kofi had chosen to keep it a secret. He feared that if the villagers knew, they would judge him, expecting him to behave in ways that didn't align with his values. Lina was left speechless. Her mind reeled as she processed the information. She had married a secret millionaire, and yet, she hadn't known. She was torn, Did she feel betrayed, or was she touched by Kofi's desire to keep his true self hidden for the sake of their marriage? As the days went by, Lina's feelings toward Kofi grew more complex. On the one hand, she felt a sense of relief and even gratitude. The financial security Kofi's wealth offered was undeniable. But on the other hand, she felt conflicted. Why had Kofi kept such a huge secret from her? Had their marriage been based on a lie? Despite the revelation, Lina was determined to look beyond the material wealth and focus on their relationship. She knew that their journey together would not be defined by money alone. It would take time for her to heal emotionally and for them to rebuild their trust. In the days that followed, Lina found herself reflecting deeply on her own self-worth. For the first time, she questioned why she had stayed silent in their marriage for so long. She realized that her silence was a result of her own insecurities, fears that she wasn't worthy of love or respect. With Kofi's revelation, she began to understand that self-worth wasn't defined by external circumstances, such as wealth or judgment from others. It came from within, from knowing who she was and standing firm in her own truth. She began to speak more freely, sharing her thoughts and emotions with Kofi, no longer allowing her fears to silence her. With each passing day, Lina grew stronger. She embraced her own vulnerability and began to heal from the emotional wounds that had held her back for so long. She learned that true strength wasn't about perfection, but about accepting oneself and allowing room for growth. Through Kofi's wisdom and her own inner strength, Lina discovered the power of healing, not just physically, but emotionally as well. She began to see the importance of emotional honesty, not only in her marriage but in every relationship she had. Lina's journey of self-discovery began with an important first step, forgiveness. While the revelation about Kofi's hidden wealth had shaken her, Lina understood that harboring resentment would only hurt her. She realized that Kofi's choice to hide his wealth wasn't an act of betrayal, but rather a misguided attempt to protect their bond from the expectations and pressures of their village. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lina finally spoke. "I was hurt, Kofi. But I understand now. You didn't want to change who we were. You wanted us to be real, to love each other for who we are, not what we have." Kofi's eyes filled with gratitude, and he took her hand in his. For the first time in their marriage, they both felt an emotional connection deeper than just the surface. Lina's willingness to forgive was the beginning of her own healing process, a path she had never known before. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. Though they had made progress, Lina felt a lingering unease every time she looked at Kofi. She couldn't shake the doubt that sometimes arose, asking whether Kofi was still hiding parts of himself from her. Would there be more secrets? Could she trust him completely now? Kofi understood her fears. He worked hard to show her that his intentions were pure, that his love for her wasn't influenced by money or anything external. He invited her to meet the people who had been with him during his rise to wealth, his mentors, friends, and business partners, and to see the businesses he had built with his hard work. Slowly, Lina began to see that Kofi's wealth didn't define him. What mattered more was his integrity, his values, and the way he treated her. With Kofi's wealth becoming more widely known, the village began to look at them differently. People who had once ignored them or spoken ill of their humble beginnings were now seeking their favor. The pressure was immense. Lina found herself caught between the expectations of the villagers and her own desire to live a simple, peaceful life. Kofi was adamant that they wouldn't change who they were. "We are not defined by their perceptions of us. Our worth is something we choose," he told her. But Lina struggled with the pressure to live up to the image of wealth and success that others had painted for them. It took time for her to accept that they didn't need to prove anything to anyone, but rather, it was important to remain true to their own values and their own journey. Lina began to focus more on her own personal growth. She started attending village meetings and speaking up about issues that mattered to her. It was a small step, but it was a powerful one. As Lina found her voice, she realized that empowerment wasn't just about financial security, it was about owning her space in the world, being unapologetically herself, and making decisions that reflected her true values. At first, her confidence wavered. There were moments when she was unsure, but she reminded herself that she was worthy of respect, regardless of her circumstances. She began to see the world not as a place full of limitations, but as an opportunity to learn and grow. As Lina grew stronger, she also began to heal emotionally. She connected with other women in the village, hearing their stories of hardship, struggle, and strength. She realized that many of them, just like her, had faced challenges they had never spoken about. This shared understanding created a bond between them. Lina began helping others who were going through tough times, whether it was offering a kind word or teaching them how to manage their lives and resources more effectively. In turn, helping others became a source of her own healing. The more she shared her strength with others, the stronger she became. Kofi noticed the change in her and, with quiet admiration, supported her efforts. Together, they began building a small community center where they could host classes and workshops, empowering others with the tools they needed to improve their lives. Through these experiences, Lina discovered that her self-worth wasn't contingent upon her external circumstances, whether wealth, marriage, or the opinions of others. It was about the value she placed on herself, her dignity, and her choices. One evening, as she stood before a group of women, sharing her story, she realized just how far she had come. The village that once looked down on her now listened to her words with respect. She no longer felt the need to hide her true self or apologize for who she was. She had learned to accept herself completely, with all her flaws, struggles, and victories. Lina smiled to herself. She had discovered her inner strength, and with it, she had the power to heal and empower others. While Lina was discovering her own empowerment, Kofi was on a similar journey. His decision to hide his wealth had been a way to protect both himself and Lina, but it had also stemmed from his own fear of judgment. As the village began to look at him differently, Kofi realized that he had to confront his own feelings about wealth and self-worth. He spent more time reflecting on his values and how they aligned with his actions. Slowly, he came to understand that his worth wasn't just in the money he had accumulated, it was in the relationships he built, the integrity he upheld, and the love he gave to Lina. As Kofi and Lina continued their individual journeys, they began to grow together. They found that their personal growth didn't diminish their bond, it strengthened it. They began to communicate more openly, share their fears and dreams, and support each other's paths toward healing. Lina learned that self-empowerment didn't mean she had to walk alone. True strength came from being able to lean on each other when needed. In Kofi, she had found not just a husband, but a partner who supported her unconditionally. Together, they began to realize that the true measure of wealth was not in what they owned, but in the love they shared and the strength they drew from each other. Months passed, and the transformation in both Lina and Kofi was undeniable. They had shed the weight of judgment and expectations, replacing them with a deep sense of self-acceptance and a renewed sense of purpose. The village, once skeptical of them, now admired them for their resilience and wisdom. Lina's journey had taught her that true empowerment wasn't about avoiding challenges, it was about facing them head-on with courage and conviction. And Kofi's journey had shown him that wealth, when used for good, could be a tool for building a better future, not just for themselves, but for the community as well. Together, they had not only healed themselves, but had become a source of healing and inspiration for others. As the months passed, Lina's journey toward self-acceptance became an inspiration to others in the village. The community center that she and Kofi had built became a place of refuge for those seeking guidance, support, and empowerment. Women who had once felt invisible found their voices, while men who had struggled with their own insecurities began to open up about their fears. Lina began hosting workshops on personal growth, teaching others how to recognize their own worth. She shared her story of overcoming self-doubt and encouraged people to embrace their true selves, no matter their circumstances. The ripple effect of her work was undeniable. People were beginning to change, not because of external wealth or material gain, but because they had discovered the power within themselves. Kofi, too, played a significant role in this transformation. His financial resources allowed them to expand the center's outreach, providing scholarships for young people and creating programs that taught practical skills like business management and agriculture. He understood that while money was important, it was the investment in people that would ultimately lead to lasting change. While Lina and Kofi were building a new future, Lina's past continued to haunt her. Despite all her progress, there were still memories of the village elders who had arranged her marriage to Kofi and the years of living in poverty. She had always felt as though she had no control over her destiny, that her life was a series of decisions made for her by others. One evening, Lina took a walk by the river where she had spent so many years dreaming of a different life. As she sat by the water, she reflected on the choices that had led her to this point. While she had once resented those who had forced her into marriage, she now saw it differently. Her journey, as painful as it had been, had shaped the woman she had become. She had learned to overcome adversity, to grow from her challenges, and to embrace her true self. It was then that she realized, her self-worth had never been dependent on the choices of others. It had always been within her. The moment she had accepted herself, her past no longer had power over her. As the village continued to evolve, so did Lina. She began to embrace change more freely, understanding that growth came from embracing the unknown. She and Kofi had started to plan for a future beyond the village, exploring opportunities to expand their work and help other communities discover their own strength. With her newfound wisdom, Lina recognized that healing wasn't just about overcoming the past, it was about building a future that was true to who she was. She was no longer bound by the limitations of her upbringing or her initial feelings of unworthiness. She had learned that her value came from within, and no external force could ever take that away. Kofi, too, was embracing change. As they began planning to expand their outreach, he shared his thoughts with Lina. "I used to think that my wealth defined me," he confessed one night as they sat under the stars. "But now I know that true wealth is the impact we make on others. We're just getting started." Lina smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. Together, they were ready to step into a new chapter of their lives, one built on love, trust, and a shared commitment to empowering others. Money, but by the richness of the relationships we build, the lives we touch, and the way we choose to see ourselves. The couple had healed together, found strength in each other, and, in turn, had helped an entire village heal. They had overcome the judgment of others, discovered their own worth, and used their experiences to create lasting change. And as Lina looked out over the village, she knew that their work was far from over. There were more stories to be told, more lives to be touched, and more journeys of healing to begin. But for the first time in her life, she felt certain of one thing: she had the power to shape her own destiny, and with Kofi by her side, they would continue to make the world a better place, one person at a time. Years had passed, and the village had blossomed into a thriving community, full of opportunity and hope. The once struggling village that had been a place of poverty and silence was now a model of growth and empowerment. Lina and Kofi, who had once been defined by their circumstances, were now leaders, mentors, and symbols of resilience. On a bright and peaceful morning, the village gathered in the newly built community hall to celebrate the legacy that Lina and Kofi had created. The walls of the hall were adorned with pictures of the people whose lives had been transformed, young girls who had pursued education, men who had found strength in vulnerability, and families who had embraced a life of purpose. As Lina stood in front of the crowd, her heart swelled with pride and gratitude. She had come so far from the girl who once doubted her worth. The lessons she had learned were simple, but profound. She looked at Kofi, standing beside her with a warm, proud smile. His eyes, once filled with doubt, now shone with a quiet strength, a strength that had come not from his wealth, but from his journey alongside her. Lina addressed the crowd, her voice steady and full of conviction. "When I first married Kofi, I thought I was just a poor village girl, bound by circumstance. But through love, hardship, forgiveness, and growth, I discovered something far more powerful than wealth: self-worth. We all have the power within us to heal, to grow, and to create change. We are not defined by our past or our external circumstances. We are defined by the strength we find within ourselves. She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. True wealth isn't measured by the things we own or the titles we hold. It's measured by the love we give, the compassion we share, and the way we uplift one another. This village, this community, is a testament to that truth. And it's just the beginning. We are all capable of greatness, of healing, and of making the world a better place, one step at a time. The crowd erupted in applause, and Lina's heart swelled with emotion. The work she and Kofi had begun had touched more lives than she had ever imagined, and in the process, they had both found the true meaning of success. Inner peace, love, and the power to make a difference. As the years went by, Lina and Kofi's legacy continued to grow. They watched as the children of their village, empowered by the lessons they had imparted, went on to lead successful, fulfilling lives. Some returned to give back to the community that had shaped them, while others spread the message of self-acceptance and empowerment to far-reaching places. Lina and Kofi had learned that the greatest wealth in life wasn't money, it was the impact they had on others, the love they shared, and the way they had helped others realize their own worth. Their lives were filled with joy, contentment, and purpose. And as they sat together, watching the sunset over the village they had transformed, they knew that they had lived a life true to their values, one of love, strength, and service to others. The lessons they had learned, about self-acceptance, inner strength, and the power of love, would continue to resonate for generations. Lina had started her journey as a poor, doubtful girl, but through the power of love and personal growth, she had found not only her worth, but her purpose. The story of Lina and Kofi was one of transformation, of overcoming adversity, and of realizing that the true power to change the world lies within us all. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter where life took them, they had already built a legacy that would endure forever. The greatest lesson from Lina and Kofi's story is that true strength and success are found within. External circumstances, whether wealth or social status, do not define who we are. It is our self-worth, our ability to love ourselves, and our willingness to heal and grow that shape our destiny. By embracing who we are, forgiving ourselves and others, and empowering those around us, we can create lives filled with purpose, love, and lasting impact. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories.